My wife fell asleep in the bathtub, and I think she's dead.
It was a night like any other. August 11th, 2008. Ryan and Sarah Whitmer, married just 4 months, were in the beginning stages of building their new life together. After a typical workday, 24-year-old Sarah and 27-year-old Ryan relaxed on the sofa and turned on some sports. Sarah wasn't feeling well that day, so she decided to go upstairs after dinner to take a bath. Ryan stayed downstairs in the living room a little while longer, had a few beers, and continued to watch a football game, occasionally flipping the channel and checking in on the Olympics. Sometime after 10 p.m., Ryan was ready to call it a night, so he headed upstairs to get ready for bed. When he opened the door to the upstairs bathroom, he walked in to find a terrifying scene. Sarah was in the bathtub and didn't appear to be breathing. A panicked Ryan called 911. This is Ryan's version of events, but the police in this Law and Order Ohio community would have a very different version. A version that didn't involve an accidental drowning of a healthy 24-year-old woman. Their version would ultimately win in the courts when Ryan was convicted of second-degree murder and later sentenced to 15 years to life in prison. Throughout this podcast, you'll hear Ryan speak to us from Ohio Correctional Reception Center, where he's serving his time. But before we meet the players involved in this case, let us briefly introduce ourselves for those who didn't listen to Season 1 and welcome those people back who did. My name's Megan Sachs.
And I'm Amy Sloshberg.
We are both criminologists, and we have spent our entire careers working in the criminal justice system. My areas of expertise include bail reform, plea bargaining, sentencing policy, serial offending, and more.
I am an associate professor of criminology and department chair at Fairleigh Dickinson University in New Jersey. My research focuses on miscarriages of justice, the negative implications of incarceration, and issues surrounding reentry, with an emphasis on policy and procedural reform.
You do a lot of work too now with exonerees post-exoneration, right? Because you're now working on studies as well. So I mentioned that because some people do work on exonerations, but you do the afterlife, right?
Yeah.
Like what happens after people are exonerated?
Exactly. Yeah, I'm interested in the reentry process for people who are exonerated.
Right. And I think that people don't often, I think you're kind of unique in that way, right? Like a small group of people are looking at those post-exoneration.
You know, everyone thinks once an individual is exonerated, everything from there is all rosy, right? But that's when life is really starting for these individuals, and it's really hard for them to, get back.
Right. The healing process begins then. So I love that you do that work. Well, it's great to be back doing Direct Appeal Season 2.
Yes, it's been a long time coming.
For those of you who have asked, we weren't actually sure we were going to return with a Season 2 of Direct Appeal, but we didn't expect that we would be inundated with letters, emails, and phone calls with people asking for help on either behalf of themselves or for a loved one. So this kind of happened following the 2020 episode on Melanie McGuire's case. So I think because of, just how many people need help, we felt compelled to take on another case. But this was harder this time around because we had so many people that wanted us to look at their case. And as most people know, we're a small team of 3. We have full-time jobs, and this is, hard. So we had to kind of do a vetting process this time around.
Like you said, we're a small team. We can't help everyone. We're not lawyers, and people that we can't help, we like to at least give them options of where else they could go. But it's really sad to see how many people are desperately fighting for their loved ones and themselves.
I agree. It was heartbreaking reading the letters. And we did try to respond to everyone, at least giving them, other suggestions for, either innocence projects or other organizations, other podcasts who might be able to look into it. We chose Ryan Widmer's case, though, after receiving a number of emails from someone who is a former doctor, and I would say humanitarian, interested in writing what he perceived to be a wrongful conviction. And there was something about Ryan's case that sparked my interest right from the beginning, because Sarah was found in the bathtub by Ryan, and seemingly no one else had entered the house, which leaves us with 2 primary possibilities. One is that Ryan killed Sarah, whether in the heat of the moment or something more premeditated, or 2, as he says, he found Sarah drowned in the bathtub. But what could cause an otherwise healthy woman in her 20s to drown in her own bathtub? And we were lucky, Amy, because we got some help in our investigation from journalist and author Janice Hissel, who covered Sarah Whitmer's death and Ryan's case in the criminal justice system. Janice also wrote the book Submerged about her experience covering this case, about the many players involved, the politics, the media sensation, and her own changing feelings about Ryan Widmer's involvement in Sarah's death. Through Janice, Ryan, and others involved in this case, we'll present to you everything we learned, and in the end, you can decide. One disclaimer we'd also like to add, though, before we get into the details of the story, is that regardless, Sarah Whitmer is a victim, and we will treat her with the respect and dignity she deserves. We'll do our best to be respectful of Sarah and all the parties affected by her death.
Megan, after Direct Appeal Season 1, we got a lot of comments from listeners who were upset because they felt that Melanie was guilty or they felt she was innocent. And I think it's important to let our listeners know the way we're coming at this. It's not always so black or white, innocent or guilt.
You're right. This is not just an exploration of innocence or guilt. It's an exploration of the entire criminal justice process. And is due process working? This is an exploration of what happens at the bail stage. What happens when someone is arrested? What happens when someone is indicted? We are trying to figure out if all of these mechanisms are in place. Are they working properly? And do they lead us to justice? Or at any part of this course, could justice be, diverted because something went wrong at one of these stages? And I think that's going to have consequences not just for the person who we're investigating, but for anyone who is ever subjected to the criminal justice system.
And I don't want to spoil Season 1 for those people who haven't listened and might want to go back and listen, but I personally, and I know you probably feel the same, Megan, I went into that thinking one way and I came out of it thinking a total other way. And so our listeners say the same thing. Some people were convinced one way and, so I think it's important to just be open-minded and listen to everything before you're so quick to judge someone.
Right.
The way people are portrayed in the media, the way people are portrayed, the way we judge their affect in 911 calls or just when they talk, like none of these things are science. And we really need to look at these cases more objectively.
And as was the case last time, because we also received comments about it, we did try to contact law enforcement, prosecution, states experts, and people either declined to participate or just did not respond at all. As we go through the case, we'll let you know who those people are so that, you realize we're doing our very best to balance the scales here, but we can only work with, the people who are willing to participate with us. And as you're listening, we want to hear what you think. So there's a couple ways you can reach out to us. You can always email us at tips@directappealpodcast.com. That's TIPS@directappealpodcast.com. You can send us a message through our website, or you can leave us a voicemail at 570-844-0499. And of course, you can always engage with us on Instagram or Facebook. So now that we discussed the vetting process and we've discussed all of these things, we'd like to introduce you to the subject of Direct Appeal Season 2.
As far as growing up, everything was normal. My mom was about the best mom you could ask for. She worked her way up from being a secretary to an executive vice president of the company she worked for. And she just did everything we needed. And it was myself, my twin brother, and then younger brother. We had a normal childhood and grew up, all played sports, God did well in school, whatever. And then when when I was about in the fourth grade, my mom and dad, that's when they got their divorce. And we moved to another area with just my mom and do the whole custody thing with my dad on the weekends and whatnot. So still relatively normal. And then at some point, my brothers and I didn't see my dad anymore for a lot of years growing up on throughout high school. And that was, and then obviously then I went off to college, and I guess that would probably be about the end of my childhood there.
Ryan Widmer was born November 3rd, 1981, along with his twin brother, Aaron, to parents Jill and Gary. He also has a younger brother, Kyle. The family resided in a small, quaint, blue-collar community in the west side of Cincinnati, Ohio, where everything was seemingly going well for the family until about 1990. So at this time, Amy, Jill, and Gary filed for divorce. And unfortunately, as many divorces are, it was extremely contentious. And as a result, the boys cut off all contact from their father, Gary, and they wouldn't speak to him for several years to come. I always wonder about these divorces that get so contentious that children don't see their parents or speak to them for years.
I couldn't imagine. My parents got divorced, but it was not contentious. Well, no, maybe it was contentious, but not, I couldn't imagine it being so contentious that I wouldn't talk to my parents.
Did you stay with your dad or mom? Like, did they share custody? Like, how did that work?
I was already old.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
right. You were older. That's right. Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I just wondered, like,
Yeah.
to be broken off from your father, that must have been very traumatic.
Especially for 3 boys.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. Regardless, Ryan describes his childhood as still being a good one. The Widmers were a tight-knit family with the 3 boys. They were tight with their mother, Jill, and they spent a lot of time with their cousins. Ryan was also extremely close with his grandmother and spent a lot of time with her. Overall, Ryan was considered a nice, quiet guy who, by all accounts, was just laid back. That's the thing I've heard the most about him. Didn't show much emotion, wasn't an emotional guy, and wasn't easily rattled. Here's Ryan's first cousin and avid supporter, Sean, talking about the Ryan he knows.
He's probably one of the most gentle, caring people I've ever been around. Of the 6 of us, I would say he would be the most non-aggressive, docile, peaceful type guy. He's the guy when my grandmother was really in her last legs, he was the one that basically took care of her, waited on her hand and foot. I mean, he did everything. He's just the most caring, selfless person I've ever been around.
In fact, his cousins and his brothers would even poke fun at Ryan because he didn't even like to really roughhouse with them. He was just a gentle soul. So you heard growing up, Ryan was very athletic. He played baseball and basketball. He was a huge sports fan. He graduated, as he said, from high school. I think it was Coleraine High School in 1999, where he excelled.
That's when I graduated.
You graduated in 1999?
Yeah, we're the same exact age, me and Ryan.
That's right, because you're younger than me. I forgot. It's kind of odd to be doing someone who's the same age as you.
Yeah.
And think about where you are in your life and where he is at his. Regardless, Ryan received a partial athletic scholarship to play baseball at Miami University in Oxford, Ohio. I always think that's funny, Miami in Ohio. During college, he worked at an Enterprise rent-a-car, and he was just a normal guy again by all accounts, had friends, worked hard. Chris Kist was Ryan's college baseball teammate and roommate. Ryan would be a groomsman at Chris's wedding, so they were incredibly close, and he was also very close with Dana, Chris's wife. So Dana agreed to speak with us, and here she is describing how she became friends with Ryan.
I actually met Ryan through my husband, Chris. Him and Chris were roommates in college. Took several classes together, hung out together, and then decided to get an apartment off campus and live together for a while. Him and I spent a lot of time together, when we were out at parties, just the 2 of us kind of chatting. Not that we didn't fit in with that crowd. It was just a lot easier to kind of hang out with each other. We got along really well, which was nice. He was just a laid-back, cool kind of guy. I don't know. He was funny. He was just easy to hang out with, easy to talk to. Was a good friend to Chris. He was always there for Chris, that was for sure. He was always over, so he came over for football games. He came over, we hung out a lot, especially when Chris and I were first dating.
Ryan graduated in 2004 with a BA in sports studies, and he quickly found a job in the field, which we know can be quite difficult right out of college. He worked in the facilities and operations department at the Western and Southern Open, which is a local tennis tournament, briefly, before being hired in the sports marketing department at the Warren County Convention and Visitors Bureau, and that was in November 2004. He was reportedly good at his job. He climbed the ranks quickly, starting as a sports marketing assistant, and then he was promoted to sports marketing manager in 2006, and then he was promoted again just 2 years later in 2008 to sales manager. Ryan loved his job, and he was very close with his coworkers. There were only 9 employees, mostly older women, with whom I think he felt this kind of familial type connection, almost sisterly, motherly. Things seemed to be going well for Ryan's career, but his friends felt like he needed something else in his life. And Amy, what do you think that something was?
A girlfriend.
Yes, love it was. They felt he needed a girlfriend. So in August 2006, Ryan's close friend, Chris Kist, and wife, Dana, invited him on a blind double date to meet Dana's good friend, Sarah Stewart. Dana had met Sarah through a mutual friend who attended dental hygiene school with Sarah.
Sarah and I became really close. I mean, we hung out all the time. She hung out at my house, even with just Chris and I. My husband taught her how to drive a stick. I mean, she literally sat on the floor with me when I took pregnancy tests and I found out I was pregnant with my son and fed me pregnancy test after pregnancy test while I was going to the bathroom. I mean, that's like probably way too much personal information, but that's the kind of person she was. So it was mine idea, because I loved Ryan and I was like, they would just be so good together. Because to me, they kind of are similar to Chris and I. Like my husband, Chris, is a lot like Ryan. They're laid back. They just kind of go with the flow of things. They're funny. They're entertaining, but they don't get up in arms about much of anything. They're not kind of like sassy and fiery like Sarah and I both are. So I feel like we had such similar personalities. And I was like, if we work so well, what if they worked? So it was Chris and I's idea to hook them up and have them meet. We actually were there with them when they had their first dinner, just to kind of make things not weird, so the other people were there. I mean, I feel like they instantly they liked each other. They were Sarah's kind of upfront, in your face kind of personality. And like I said, Ryan's kind of laid back, but they seemed to get along really well. They chatted most of the evening and had little conversations that didn't even include Chris and I. And, when they left, Ryan was like, can I get your number? Can we, do this again sometime? And then from then on, they started dating, which was awesome for us.
Sarah and Ryan clicked right away, and they began spending a lot of time together quickly. So a little bit on Sarah. She was born in 1984 to Ruth Ann and Michael Stewart. He was reportedly brilliant. He had a PhD in martial arts, science, and philosophy, and grew up in Butler County, which is a blue-collar town about 25 miles from where Ryan grew up. Sarah had one brother, Mike Stewart. She was very active growing up, and like Ryan, she played many sports. Sarah graduated from high school in 2002 and then worked at a Sears portrait studio for a bit before enrolling in a dental hygiene program at Raymond Walters College. She completed that program pretty quickly in 2006 and was hired as a dental hygienist for Dr. John Becker in Fort Thomas, Kentucky, which borders Ohio. Unfortunately, in 2007, Sarah's father passed away after battling cancer, but her mother would eventually meet another man by the name of Mike Grimes, who was a Butler County Sheriff's deputy. And I think we might want to keep that in mind for later on in our story. He might come up again. Sarah was described as more high-strung than Ryan. Friends called her Sassy Sue. She was bubbly and liked to joke around. Let's hear Ryan on Sarah's personality.
I mean, really, I always tell people, and, it's just, she was really one of the best people I ever met. I mean, one of the things, I've always considered myself to be a good person, but one of the things she always really instilled in me is just showing your appreciation to people, for the things they do, and always being, you can always count on her. She would always treat everybody with respect, and I think that's why a lot of the people that, she dealt with at her work, a lot of the customers always really liked her, and the way we get along, there's times when you can joke or things you can joke about that maybe some people can't joke about because maybe they're too sensitive, and her and I had that good mesh of, know when to be serious and know when to joke. I don't know. I think some people are just too sensitive and you can't say certain things or joke, but her and I, there's never anything she said offended me or never anything I said to offend her. We didn't have a problem laughing at each other. Let's put it that way. She wasn't afraid to tell you how she's feeling. I'm more of a passive person. I'm not always going to be the one to outright, tell somebody how it is. She had no problem doing that. So we're very different in that way. But as far as, again, I just think her and I personalities really meshed well. I mean, we knew to be serious, but we could also joke with each other. It was, I don't know, there's never a time that I could really remember where we even had so much as any kind of a major argument about or dispute about anything.
Megan, do you notice when he talks about Sarah, he kind of lights up?
Yes.
Right? His voice sounds kind of flat, in other contexts, but he sounds really excited, right?
That's a great observation. And I noticed that, I spoke with Ryan for many, many hours, and that did happen. And you will hear that again, not obviously at times where it was something sad, but yeah. I mean, he did seem to light up. I like his description of Sarah's personality too. I know Dana talked a little bit about her, but she also describes her.
She was fun. She was spunky. She was sassy. She didn't take shit off of anybody. I think that's why we got along so well, because we have very kind of similar personalities, I feel like, when it comes to that. But she was very smart, very loving, super loyal, just one of those friends that at any moment you call, that she's there. So she was such a good person.
Megan, that sounds like a description of you.
No, I've listened to this a couple times, and the descriptions of her was she was fun, she was feisty, she was in control. Like, I'm not kidding you. I thought the same thing. I'm like, this does sound like me.
Yeah.
I feel like the description of their relationship also kind of sounded like me and James, just to be honest. James is more laid back than me. Like
Well, everyone's more laid back than you.
That's actually that's a fair point. Okay, that's a fair point. But I felt like, Sarah was the kind of woman who was self-assured too. She knew what she wanted. She had a take-charge personality. And I think that meshed very well with Ryan's go-with-the-flow attitude as described by Ryan and Dana. And Ryan and Sarah, both close with each other's families as well. Ryan's mom, Jill, adored Sarah. She spent a lot of weekends with Ryan's family at their lake home in Kentucky. And reportedly, Sarah's family also liked Ryan a lot. The two seemed to be meant for each other. And this was observed by many around them, not just Ryan or Dana. Ryan's cousin Sean also made this observation.
They had a really positive relationship. But they were always, she was kind of the boss, and that was fine. She was like feisty. She was like she complimented him greatly. Just had a really great relationship. I never saw them argue or anything like that.
After I did these interviews, I was starting to see it was consistent.
They were also in the honeymoon stage of their relationship.
I think they were in the honeymoon stage probably for the whole time. I don't actually know. When does the honeymoon stage end, you think?
Couple of years, probably.
Okay. Then they definitely were. Their relationship moved fast, actually. And just a few months after that first date, and in, I think it was about early 2007, Ryan and Sarah purchased a home together in Hopewell Valley, Ohio, which was about 25 miles north of Cincinnati, to put it in context here. And this was Hamilton Township, which was in Warren County. And this area was considered a, somewhat conservative, safe, nice place. There were a lot of young couples and young families building their first homes here. So it was kind of clear that they were on the fast track in terms of their relationship. And soon after the move, Ryan knew that he wanted to marry Sarah. His grandmother had passed away and left him enough money to buy a ring. And after about a year together, in the spring of 2007, 26-year-old Ryan proposed to 23-year-old Sarah.
We were probably dating about a year and a half before I asked her to marry me. So my mom went with me to help pick the ring out. Obviously, Sarah had no idea. And Sarah and I had went over to my mom's house, and she was having a little get-together with some of her work friends and whatnot. And one of her mom's work friends was saying stuff to me, and even my mom was kind of running her mouth about it. And I thought Sarah actually heard him, and I was worried that my mom was going to tell her, because my mom was really happy. She really...
This call is originating from an Ohio correctional facility and may be recorded and monitored.
Really happy that I was going to ask her to marry me. So I actually got the ring on a Friday, and, was so nervous. And I wanted to include my dog, CJ. He was a French bulldog. And the reason I thought it was so funny is because he was a grump, and a lot of people didn't like him. So I wanted to include him because originally she didn't like him, but once, he lived with us and she got to see how he really was, she ended up really liking him. So she was in the shower on the Friday when she got home from work, and lo and behold, I coaxed him to go upstairs and go into the bedroom and the bathroom, and he went up, and she didn't really see it. And so she ended up reaching out to pet him. She saw it.
At this point, our call was interrupted, and if you've ever had to deal with a prison's phone system, you know the frustration. Unfortunately, this is common with most prisons, and it will happen again during this podcast. You might also notice that at times, the quality of Ryan's phone calls is not great and will vary throughout this podcast. This is unfortunately something we could not control, and we do our best to make it listenable.
When she saw the ring, around CJ's neck, I just said, "Will you?" And of course she said, "Yeah." She never let me live that one down just because it was so, in a way, I still felt a little rushed just because I was worried my mom was going to break the news to her, I guess. So I don't know why I wasn't rushed at the moment. I think I just rushed it. But I thought it was pretty cool, using CJ. And she obviously liked, the fact that I asked her to marry me. We went out to eat. There was a real nice, local Italian restaurant that I loved. And we had, we went to my mom's and then went there, and my mom, pre-ordered a bottle of champagne there for us, and then we met her mom and her mom's boyfriend. So yeah, everybody was happy, and I had asked her mom, before I talked to her mom about it because her dad passed away. So obviously, again, the traditional thing of asking the father for a hand in marriage. I didn't necessarily ask her mom for her hand, but I pretty much, made sure she was okay that I was going to ask her daughter to marry me.
So this is a happy time for them. They got engaged. I think using the dog is actually cute. I think that's something that you would appreciate, right?
Yeah, very cute. I love how he said the dog was a grump.
I know, I thought so too.
So cute.
So what did he got flack for, I think, saying, will you? Maybe he didn't I don't know if he didn't finish the sentence because he was saying he got flack for this. And I remember thinking I should have asked him what he was, I think it's because he just said, will you?
Yeah, it sounds like he froze or something. He got nervous and just said, will you? I don't know. Will you seems like okay, though, if you're holding a ring.
I guess so. I'm not really sure. I also know that, Ryan's a little quieter, a little shyer, and maybe was a little nervous or embarrassed. He said he was rushed. It was probably the nerves. But Sarah was happy nonetheless, and the two of them were engaged. And on April 19th, 2008, they got married. Father John Tonkin presided over their Catholic wedding at a church in Ohio, and the reception followed at Ryan's mother's country club. And then the pair went on to honeymoon in Costa Rica. So everything was great for this young couple. They were in, as you said, Amy, the honeymoon phase. However, just 114 days later, on the seemingly normal day of August 11th, 2008, everything would change for the Widmers.
Nothing was really out of the ordinary. She got up and left for work before I left. I don't remember exacts, but I know we probably text a few times throughout the day. And, everything was normal until, I got home, and I remember her telling me over the phone when we talked that she just wasn't feeling real well. So, we didn't really have much to do that night anyway. So when she got home, I was still trying to take care of it and get the grass to grow at the house. That's how new it was. So I was out kind of working on the yard a little bit, watering, and had dinner together, and just kind of had some leftovers that we just kind of microwaved and warmed up. She just laid on the couch. I could just tell she wasn't feeling real well, but just a headache, was the main thing. Nothing to where it alarmed me that something was wrong with her. She just laid on the couch, and I kind of rubbed her neck and head, just kind of tried to massage her a little bit. And I'd keep kind of going in and out outside, doing stuff outside. And then when she went up to take her bath that night and go to bed, nothing raised an alarm on me, like thought that something was really wrong with her. I know, I was sitting right next to her when she talked to her friend, Amy, and she had even told her that night that she wasn't feeling well and she had to get off the phone. So, I was watching the Bengals were playing their first preseason game that night. So I was, again, watching that even the preseason. It's not really a real game, so I was kind of just still, again, going in and out outside a little bit here and there, watching that. And I just know from that time it had to be, the game probably would have started about 8:30. It was a little bit after that. Of course, she told me she loved me. We kissed each other, real quick kiss before she went upstairs. She went to check the front door. She was always, not worried about locking the door, but just kind of not even OCD about it, but just would always make sure it was locked. And I kind of laughed it off with her just because I'm like, yeah, of course it's locked. We haven't even gone out the front door. So she went up, and I had to be like 10, just after 10 o'clock when I went upstairs. The game wasn't quite over yet, but I was also watching the Olympics were on that night. It was one of them years when Michael Phelps was setting all kinds of records, so I was flipping back and forth between that as well as the game. And I went up about 10-ish, 10 o'clock somewhere in there, and walked in the room, and I kind of took my clothes off, got into my boxers because that's where I would sleep in my boxers, sometimes t-shirt, but in the summer, sleeping in my boxers, and put that down, and then walked into the bathroom to brush my teeth and stuff, and that's when
At that point, we reached our time limit on the prison phone, so we had to reconnect to hear Ryan continue, describing what he saw as he walked into their bathroom.
When I walked in, so her head was opposite towards the doors, and she was laying, her head was underneath like the water spigot, and she was, her face was looking upwards, but she was underneath the water. So automatically, I just dropped down to my knees and, pulled her upper torso part, her body up out of the water. And I'm just trying to get a reaction from her at that point. I mean, she was just lifeless. I mean, I was completely shocked walking in to see what I saw. And, so I'm kind of, giving her tap, Sarah, just trying to understand what's going on. And obviously when I was not getting any kind of reaction, just my instinct was to call 911. And I reached, her phone was sitting on the sink, the vanity, and I grabbed her phone, called 911, and I didn't think it rang through or lost service, so I hung up her phone. Well, my phone was out on the nightstand by the bed, so I ran out, grabbed my phone, and obviously I had her up, out the water as best I could. And I should say that, I take that back. Before all that, I actually pulled the drain plug, which it's hard to describe. The drain plug is not just one you pull up. You kind of had to pull and twist it. And the water, at that point was draining out. And, just the whole time just still trying to get the reaction from her. And when I left to go get my phone, I didn't let her fall back down in the tub. I mean, I tried to just kind of leave her as best I could. Ran out and got the phone. As I'm coming back in, I'm grabbing picking her butt back up, out of the bottom portion of the tub, I guess you would say, and called 911. And obviously, I'm sure you have the 911 recording, but everything after that was on the phone with the 911 operator.
Ryan's just described what started off as a normal day. They went to work, they came home, they watched some sports. A couple things to note in his description. One thing is that he said Sarah wasn't feeling well, but also you should know that her friend called. Mm-hmm. Her friend Amy also would later say that Sarah wasn't feeling well that day, as well as people she worked with. Apparently she had some sort of bad headache going on, which is why she went upstairs to take a bath and went to bed a little bit early. It's just something to keep in mind. But Ryan's account now is that he goes upstairs to go to bed. He's just watching the Bengals, and he finds his wife underwater, face up, clearly looking, he says, lifeless.
Didn't he say face down in the 911 call?
So we're going to listen to that 911 call next episode, and we're going to dissect it because this is going to become a huge piece of this puzzle and really a huge source of controversy with what he said one time versus another. So was she face up or face down?
Also, he said she was by the spigot, which is interesting.
Yes. Why do you think so? We didn't talk about this, but James and I actually discussed this as well.
Well, because if you're taking a bath, why would you have your feet would be by the spigot?
That's exactly what James said. And I thought about it because I was like, that's true usually, but I can think of a couple scenarios.
Like if you're washing your hair, maybe?
It's exactly what I said.
But still, if you're washing your hair, almost like your face would have to be under the water to wash. Like, I don't know.
Well, this is purely anecdotal, but when I've taken baths before, I would turn my head if I wanted to wash my hair and put it under, you know what I mean? I'd lean back and do it.
Maybe she had her head on the spigot doing that. Who knows?
That's a really interesting point, Amy, and one that we'll have to wait till later on to see if this was explored. So Ryan had just found Sarah lifeless underwater in the tub, at least according to Ryan. She appeared to have drowned, but her death would be a mystery that would raise so many questions. The most important, how does a healthy 24-year-old woman drown in a bathtub? Next time on Direct Appeal, we examine the 911 recording while Ryan describes what was not on the call. The investigation continues as we learn what the search warrant unveils. Direct Appeal Season 2 is written and hosted by Megan Sachs and Amy Schlossberg. Our producer is James Varga. Editing by Jose Alfonso. And special thanks to Janice Hissel, whose book Submerged was integral to this production. If you have a tip, you can submit through our website or by emailing us at tips@directappealpodcast.com. You can also help us out by following or leaving a review wherever you listen to your podcasts.